So that was a great way to start off our Connections Day. And if you're just joining us, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items with you before we start our next session. Please go ahead and submit your questions in the questions tab. We'll be answering questions throughout the presentation. And if we don't get to your question in the time allotted, someone from the Neo4j team will reach out to you directly. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand the floor over to Lance Walter, Chief Marketing Officer at Neo4j, who will introduce our next speakers.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's bring Anurag Tandon from Product Management into the mix. Anurag's our Director of Product Management for Visualization, which means that he's responsible for both the visualization technology that we deliver internally and working closely with our partner ecosystem to address that kind of wide range of end user visualization needs out there. He's got a really, really deep background in data management, analytics, business intelligence, more than 15 years of experience across pre-sales roles, product marketing, product management as well. He's got a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Maryland, and he's got an MBA from the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Anurag's really going to put a face on these things that we've talked about, so he's going to come up and demonstrate Bloom. With that, I want to pass it over to Anurag. Welcome, Anurag.
Thank you, Lance. Welcome, everybody. This is the second session of the day. We're talking about exploring graphs visually through Neo4j Bloom today, and my name is Anurag Tandon. I am the Director of Product Management for Neo4j Visualization. So very excited to talk to you about what Bloom brings to graph data science and how you can explore your outputs through Neo4j Bloom. And joining me is...
Hi, Amy Hodler. I'm back again. For those that you saw me in the previous session, if you missed that session, you'll have to go to that to get the story behind the peeps. In my day job, I am the Director of Product Marketing and Programs for Graph Data Science, which includes Bloom, which is very exciting. We're going to talk about Bloom today. We have a really cool demo, some product features, and then we'll have time for Q&A as well. So the first thing that I just want to talk a little bit about is why visualize graphs in the first place. So it may seem natural because graphs are lines and dots that you want to draw on a whiteboard or sketch something that people would want to do that. But when I started to actually visualize graphs, I started to actually see more there that wasn't as intuitive. So there's this kind of a thinking and analysis tool. So there's aha moments you have when you can visualize how things are connected. It's also a really great way to interact with your graph itself. So you can explore, so you can follow paths, and you can actually develop and prototype things when you can visualize them. And then just to communicate with people as well. If you've got data scientists talking to business users, talking to somebody who maybe is a risk expert, being able to visualize what you're talking about, being able to visualize the connections, the results of the graph algorithms that you might be doing, and be able to actually report on them is really important and brings the team together. And that is why we are bringing together Bloom with Neo4j Graph Data Science bundle as well. So previous session, we talked about the Neo4j Graph Data Science library with algorithms in the analytics workspace. Of course, that is resides upon or is a plugin for Neo4j database itself, so you can persist your native graphs themselves, both create and persist them. And then with Bloom, you're able to take a more intuitive way to visualize, explore, and as I said, prototype. So that's why we're bringing these things together, because there's kind of this natural fit between analysis, sharing, and visualization. Neo4j Bloom allows us to explore and collaborate. We look at things visually, as I said. That's a very human thing to do. We can share different perspectives. Anurag will actually show you how you do that. And when I talk about prototyping things, you can prototype a concept and then share it with the team and collaborate on making edits, or possibly taking that and then doing another workflow with it. So maybe you evaluate and then you export your information and do something else with it. So really nice way to get going with exploration in general. This is a sneak peek of the interface for Bloom. It's a very, as I mentioned, a very intuitive interface. You can do search ahead suggestions, which is actually case insensitive, which is really cool. So I don't have to know what case a developer had for a parameter. We have over 1 million different colors that you can choose from. So you can customize and call out colors based on certain attributes of a node, different size. We have icon schemes, which can be a lot of fun as well. And just allow people to kind of go through and explore their graph in a very more intuitive way and follow relationships of a certain type or a certain node type as well. So you can kind of maintain your perspective. And then, as you can see here, just a lot of different options to browse and edit and customize as well. And we're going to go very quickly into demo here because for those of you that missed the first session, we're looking at in the first session when we were looking at graph data science and algorithms with Alicia, we were looking at a retail data, so real data for an online retailer based out of the UK that has customers and transactions of certain items. So they buy things. And those things develop or are part of categories. So there's certain types of things that you might buy. And then we also have some customer information in that data as well. About 28,000 nodes, 1.1 million relationships. If you want to follow along on your own, we do have a repository with this information in it, or you can pull it directly from that research paper called Data Mining for Online Retail and Industry. We use Neo4j 4.0, Graph Data Science Library 1.2, and the Bloom browser or the Bloom visualization tool 1.3 as well in this. So taking a look at that, what we did in the first session, in case you missed it, we did some algorithms and some Cypher to basically look at the similarities, break down the graphs into customers that have similar buying patterns. So we looked at some similarities. We used Louvain community detection algorithm. We did some mutate in memory and then exported that graph out. Then we looked at the items themselves and we looked at whether we could look at items that are co-purchased in different groups. So looking at different communities in our group, do they tend to buy things together differently than other people in a different group? And so we looked at similarity. We looked at a couple between this centrality and page rank. So a couple centralities as well, which is all about influence. And then we did more mutation of that in-memory graph and then exported that as well. So now what Anurag is going to show us is how to visually explore those results to try to answer some real business questions. So Anurag, what do you have to show us? Yeah.
All right. Hopefully this is going to be really exciting. So this is the interface of Bloom. I hope that's coming through. And the first thing I'm going to show is how do I get here and what am I looking at, right? So this is our, so first of all, this is Bloom 1.3, our latest version for those of you who have already tried it before. And this is the version that supports Neo4j 4.0, which is also the latest version of the database. Everything here that we're talking about is the latest and greatest. And what you can see is that from here, I can go and take a look at multiple databases. So Alicia in her demo showed that a couple of different databases she created. She was kind enough to give it to me. I was able to set it up on my side. And I am looking at one of these perspectives of the retail data. And the first thing I can do here is take you or show you the same sort of schema that you were looking at in the slide that Amy brought up in this tool. So I'm going to essentially take a look at what do I have in this perspective. So just to show you all of it. So here is the customer. And just so you can familiarize yourself with the icons that I've picked up. Here's a customer, belongs to a particular country. The customer makes a transaction. The transaction contains items. Those items belong to a category. And then when we ran these similarity algorithms, what has happened is there are a couple of relationships that got created on items. So items are related to other items using these similar relationships. And there are a couple of communities that are tagged onto that relationship in terms of their IDs. So 1052 to 2556. And I've color coded them just slightly differently to understand what similarity are we looking at. So given that, we are going to start by searching. Bloom is a search first experience. And I'm going to just do a little intro of what do you do? How do you search before we get into the algorithms themselves. So I have items. I can look for items like Amy mentioned. This is a very, I guess, all occasion type of a store. So there are all kinds of items in this store. So I'm going to look for socks because why not, right? And I find frog sock puppet as one of the items. All right. Another item that I can look for are owls, and I find space owls. So these are really fun item names, and I can easily and very quickly find these things and place them on the canvas. Once I've placed them on the canvas, then I can start exploring on the canvas, right? Simply by pointing and clicking at them. So I could either just open up this card list and start exploring the data of each of these things, and I can look at them in more detail here, or I can simply go in and click on any of these items and get a right click and get a context menu that allows me to expand from there and so on. So one of the things that Neo4j as a graph database is great at is relating these things together, right? So I have these two items on the screen. I don't know if they're related in any way. I can click on both of them, and I can simply say, show me how these things might be related. So I'm just going to run a quick shortest path. And in this case, not knowing these items, I was able to just very quickly find that both of these items are toys. So that's not a very great looking shortest path. It was only one hop away, but I could do the same thing for anything else in this data. So I could say something like, I'm going to pull up Spain. There are countries in this data set. And here's Spain, somewhere out here in the canvas. And I can try to find our frog sock puppets somehow related to Spain. And I can do the same thing over there, and I can find shortest paths. In this case, this is a slightly longer path because somebody purchased this puppet and also purchased a jumbo bag of woodland animals, which somebody else purchased, and then that person belonged to Spain. So that's a quick intro into how do you go about looking at things in this data set and inside of Bloom. So I found that toys have multiple items here. So I'll also show you a few other tricks in terms of how do you search for specific patterns in this data. So I know that toys are connected to items. So I'm going to start with toys, and then I'm just going to start typing in items, right? So what Bloom suggests to me is based on this search term that I put in, multiple patterns. Here is a pattern where the toy category by itself is connected to any item, the whole category of items. And what this will bring back is all kinds of items that belong to the toy category, right? So we found 282 nodes, one of which is the category. There are 281 items in this category. All right, cool. But what if I wanted to find categories for all items? Well, I could just go category and then item, and that brings me a bunch of different categories and items. And I'm definitely expecting these clusters because one category, I'm expecting that the items belong to one category, right? And which is true for most of these items. But then as you see here, there is one item, this one, that's somehow in two categories. The Charlotte bag of alphabet design. I can even go zoom in and kind of take a look at it over there. And I'm wondering if there are other items like this. Of course, I can't see that in this view because I've applied a limit of 1,000 nodes at any given time. So I'm not viewing everything at the same time. So what I can do though is explore a different pattern, a category to an item and that same item belonging to a separate category. So I'm just going to type in a few keywords. I get a suggestion. That's the one I want. And I can find items that are belonging to multiple categories. So this might be an instance of either I have not tagged the data properly. Maybe this is bad data. Maybe this is an intentional thing. And as a user, if I don't know if this is intentional or not, but if there is a subject matter expert I can talk to, what I can do is I can just simply go in and say, hey, these are the items I found in multiple categories. I can either extract all of this data and send it to somebody, or I could just say, I'm interested in the items only. Let me dismiss all of these categories from this view. And for the rest of the things that are left, which are items, I can just export this data out. And this is going to save as a CSV file on my machine. And let's go take a look at that CSV file. It's loaded right here. I'm just double clicking on it, opens in Excel. I can zoom in. All right. And I can take a look. Does this look right to me? Looks right. It has those 25 or so items that are in multiple categories. And I can go ahead and give this to somebody and they can explore. They can go look back at the graph because the IDs of these nodes are also in this file, and they can look at the graph and they can understand what's going on. So that's a little bit of an intro into what Bloom does, how you interact with it, how you search, how you explore. So let's go forward. And in this case, I'm going to start with those owls that we found. And these space owls. And then in this case, I'm looking at relationships between the space owl and something else, another kind of sock that I found, the Afghan slipper sock pair. And in this case, this is an actual sock, not a toy. The other one was a sock puppet, which is a toy, but I'm actually looking at socks. So I found these two items. Again, I'm going to do my same trick of shortest path. In fact, I knew that this shortest path existed because I'm actually interested in this customer. And to Amy's point of, is there a customer? Can I make recommendations based on their purchases, based on the similarities that we've found in this data set? Let's explore. So I have this customer who bought these two items. And maybe I'm interested in what other items belong to. Maybe not belong is not the right word. The other items that are similar to these two items, so I could recommend them to this particular customer. And what I'm going to do is just select item from here. In fact, I'll just go limit this legend to only show me the stuff that's on the scene. I select those two items and I say, all right, let me expand. And the way I will expand is I can expand along certain relationship types or paths. There are quite a few of them here, but I'm interested in that community that we created based on one of the similarity algorithms, which was 1052. And so I see incoming relationships and I see outgoing relationships. Let me pick both, and I'll just go ahead and expand. And what that does is it basically brings me items that are related to, let's try to position this a bit on the screen. So space owls, come over here. Here's my customer and the Afghan slipper. All of the items related to that will come over here. So I can see that there are many items related to space owls, and I can see many fewer, but still several items related to the Afghan slippers. And these are all the similarity relationships here. So one of the things that you can do with Bloom now is to say, how do I distinguish between these different relationships? So which ones are more important, which ones are less important? So what we've done with the algorithm is we've actually applied a score to the relationship. And what we can do in Bloom is to go in and say, let me set a rule based on the score, and let me decide that I want to size the thickness of these lines so that they vary by the score. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'll apply that rule. And here I can see that the space owls have other items that are quite similar to the space owl, whereas the Afghan slipper doesn't have as close of a set of items as the space owl does. So maybe this is not as an interesting area for me to go in and explore. I want to recommend to the customer based on the space owls, but not based on the Afghan slippers. So, all right, I can start exploring this further. I'm going to go ahead and remove this area of the graph. It's gone. I'm going to focus on space owls. And let's explore what else can we learn here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to first understand the different categories from which these items come. So I'm going to pick all of the items, and I can just go click on this to pick all the items, or just press Command A. I'm using a Mac, or just from the Canvas context menu, I can select all as well. And I am going to expand to bring my categories. So I'm going to bring the categories here. And so I can distinguish the different kinds of nodes a bit better on the screen. I'm just going to temporarily size my items down. And now I can see the categories a bit more clearly. And I can see as this thing is arranging itself, all right, so my Space Owl is over here. The Space Owl is connected to toys. If I can move the stationery over here. And there are space frogs that are very similar to the Space Owls, belonging to the same toy category. So that's maybe not as much of a surprise. But then I can start exploring in other areas, and I can see the home decor has a few of these nodes that are also similar in nature. And in general, I'm finding similar items. And again, similarities here is not based on the item itself. It's based on co-purchases of items together in the same transactions. And so Space Owls must be purchased a lot with these pink-purple retro radios in the electronics. And then if I want to start understanding from these different items, I'm seeing a lot of very similar items, and also in different categories. How do I make decisions based on this further? I can go in and say, all right, we also ran centralities and we also ran page ranks on these items, which also give me more information about the influence of these items to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my items and do similar things that I applied to the relationship in terms of styling. So here I have the closeness centrality that we ran, and in this case, I'm going to size the node sizes by these scores for the centralities. And what we see here is that the Space Owl has pretty high centrality compared to some of these other smaller ones, and so do some of these other toys. The Space Frog, maybe not as much, but the set of 4 badges of dogs have a pretty high closeness centrality, and these pencils in the stationery area and so on have a high centrality as well. And if you think about it, the closeness centrality, at least the way I think about it, is the closeness centrality is about having items purchased frequently, and that are found more frequently purchased in the graph as a whole. And so if we're looking to run any kind of promotions or any kind of advertisements or anything like that to kind of push Space Owls, maybe the closeness centrality is a lagging indicator, because it's when the purchases happen and when I notice that these items are getting sold, is when I will know if the thing that I'm running, the promotion I'm running, is going to work or not. And so maybe these items are not necessarily as good for me to introduce the recommendation or run the recommendation. And maybe what I'm looking for is actually the page rank instead. So while I can look at the set of 4 badges of dogs and see that has a pretty high similarity as well as a high closeness centrality, let me see what happens when I apply page rank. And I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I want to go apply page rank. And you can see that the picture has changed quite a bit, where the set of 4 badges of dogs are still high in terms of their page rank, but suddenly these home decor items are much, much higher. And also we see this party pizza dish red retro spot is quite high, which is a kitchen item. And so these items have high page rank, which means that they may have a higher influence overall in the graph. And based on these different algorithms, they might not be a very obvious answer that jumps out. But what is obvious is that you can't look at just one characteristic to make a determination there are several of these things that you have to consider in unison to figure out what might be your strategy for whether you want to influence purchases or behavior of your customers, or you're looking to push product and get rid of inventory, or you're trying to build revenue in a short term versus order items in advance because you're going to stock out or things like that. So hopefully that gives you an idea for not just how you can use Bloom, but how you can use Bloom in the context of data science that you are running with the Neo4j for Graph Data Science platform. And with that, I'm going to go back to slides for a second and talk a little bit about what you've just seen. So graph perspectives, one of the things that I showed early on was the idea of this perspective. What these perspectives are, they define how you view the graph, particularly when you talk about business users or analysts who want to look at a graph that maybe meets the needs of lots of people in the organization, but they are coming with a certain focus in mind. Maybe they're just understanding transactions. Maybe they just want to understand customer demographics. And so you can create these different perspectives that show one set of data from the graph versus another set of data. You can call them views, if you will, on top of your physical graph. So more of a logical view of what it contains. And it allows you to set your categories and decide which relationship types should be visible in the graph inside of Bloom and so on. The next thing that, just as a reminder, we looked at was searching inside of Bloom. Like I said, search is sort of your first entry point into Bloom and how you explore Neo4j through Bloom. There are many kinds of ways that Bloom kind of intelligently suggests to you based on what you're putting in, what kind of query you might want to run. And what we were looking at was socks and owls, but then you could also do patterns with categories and items, or a particular item like particular category like toys, and then what item it belongs to. Similarly, you could do country, category, transaction. You could build your pattern, to any length that you can imagine, so that it basically gives you that initial view into the graph from where you can go into the canvas and explore at will. And then what we didn't touch on in this demo today, but is available, is a way for you to also code in your Cypher queries. So if you're a developer, or if you're a data scientist and you are very comfortable with Cypher and you want to give somebody a view of the graph based on the Cypher query that you have coded in, you can certainly put it into Bloom. You can alias it. You can say something like, here are my top 5 items, whatever the logic is underneath, right? And the user goes in and just says, give me my top 5 items. And then Bloom will very quickly return to you what that is. And so here's an example on the in the bottom screenshot there, where I'm typing in account holder with card account. And one of the things that is suggested to me is this search phrase, which is the account holder with card account coded in search that does some specific query behind the scenes. So very handy. And for those of you who looked at Bloom, maybe some time ago, here are some of the recent enhancements that we've made in this product, which you saw some of that in the demo today. You could flexibly color, code, and size your nodes, your relationships. You can style them using property values. So that's really valuable, because certainly when it comes to algorithms, you're adding to the graph in terms of these property values, or maybe these relationships and so on. And you want to be able to use that to inform what the visual shows the user. You can expand very selectively now. So you can go by relationship, you can go by neighbor type, and I showed a couple examples of those. The search phrases are again, something that we didn't cover in the demo today. But what you can see here is that this is like a small window on the bottom left here, where you can see the cipher statement that is put it into a box, which can also be parameterized using parameters. And then you can export this data out and show it to other people so that they can get value out of it as well. And Bloom's going to be available everywhere. So I will, on that note, turn it over to Amy, who can talk a bit more about it. We are definitely supporting 4.0 now today. Amy, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, great. If you could advance to the next slide, that would be great. And I've just got to say, I think, thumbs up for making me have to go for my mute button when I saw the frog sock puppet toy. Space Owls I knew was coming, but I did not know about the frog puppets. So it is a fun data set, and I think the visualization that Anurag showed it really talks to some of the advantages of using Neo4j with Bloom, and just this exploration that you can do ad hoc, so you don't have to ask another team to develop visualizations for you and get them to to host something. You can do this yourself, get going pretty easily. You can do point and click. Anurag didn't have time to show, but you can actually add relationships as well, add notes to your data set, so you can actually drive changes as well. And I think I mentioned initially about these aha moments that you get when you actually can see your data and see how it's clustered together, or how page rank might be larger in certain areas, and then you can talk to your experts there. We mentioned prototyping just a bit, so you can get up and going quickly, off the shelf. You don't have to have something bespoke to get started. And then as Anurag showed, you can just show these things to your different teams so that you can drive more collaboration. I think it gives a very domain specific and kind of business perspective of data, as opposed to just rows and columns with numbers and score. Your business users can kind of have this common language, this common visual when you're sitting down and going through things over meetings. And one of the things I hear over and over again from data scientists is they love Bloom, not because they need the visualization themselves, we hear that sometimes, but because they need it to explain to other teams things that they understand from just the numbers. So it's just a really nice tool for that. And if we could go to the next slide, I think that we'll round out some of those thoughts. Again, just a quick plug that this is part of the Graph Data Science bundle. So there is a bundle that includes the Neo4j database, the Graph Data Science library, and Bloom together. So you can get all those things together. So one more slide, and you need to try Bloom today. There are two different ways you can try it. There is a Neo4j sandbox that has Bloom installed in it already. We also have a Graph Data Science sandbox that has Bloom and the Data Science library together as well. So you can either go to the website, there are a couple links there, or you can go to either the Bloom website or go from the download website as well, or the sandbox location. So there's a couple different ways you can try it. You can either get it today, play with the sandbox, or download it as part of desktop. As Anurag mentioned, that if you're a desktop user with local a database, you can use Bloom today for free. So I think with that, we've got one slide with just some resources for you guys, and then we can open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Anurag and Amy. I just love the visualizations of Bloom. And as Amy said, we're going to take some questions now. Some have come in during the session. And if you'd like to submit a question, please don't hesitate to submit that in the questions tab located at the top of your screen. And if we don't get to your question, someone from Neo4j will reach out to you directly. But we have a few that have come in, so why don't we get started with those? And I think you were just talking about this, but I'm going to put this back out there since it was asked. Where can I run Bloom?
Sure. So Bloom can be run, like Amy just mentioned, in Neo4j desktop, and we're really excited about this because it is a change we've recently made to make Bloom available for free inside of desktop, because we see a lot of users taking desktop up for a spin, trying databases locally on desktop, and we wanted to make sure that they have an ability to visualize what they can do, what they're doing in Neo4j and on their desktops. And so really excited about getting and offering Bloom up for that purpose. So you can certainly run Bloom that way. You also have the ability to run Bloom in a hosted way, hosted fashion, hosted either by Neo4j or hosted on your own web server, and we'll provide you the files for that. And you can run it there, and it can connect to essentially any database, anywhere you're running your database. And the third way that you could try this is using Neo4j Aura, which is our managed service offering, and Bloom is available there as a beta now, and you will be able to try it with an Aura instance also.
Oh, that's great. So here's another question. They're saying I'm not an enterprise customer, so how do I get help?
So I'll go ahead and answer that one. So I think if you're a community user, and in particular if you're getting started, I really recommend going to community.neo4j.com. The community website is a fantastic way where you can learn from other people's questions. So it's searchable. You can post questions, and people will take a look at them, and the community can help you answer them. You can also post projects that you've done. If you do something really cool and you want to get it out to a graph community world, that's a great place to get started with.
Awesome, thank you. So here's a good one. How can I share my Bloom visualizations?
Awesome. So you can certainly share a screenshot, right? Everybody can do that, and they're usually nice and very pleasing to the eye. So that's a perfect way of starting. And then of course, as I showed in the demo, you can export what you're seeing on the screen as a CSV file, and it's interesting because you can have nodes, you can have relationships. Often when people export, they don't understand exactly what would be the way. When they're exporting through browser, you can definitely do that as a JSON file or in a JSON format. What we've made easy in Bloom is that when you export out of Bloom, there's a nodes file that gets saved, and then there's also a relationships file that gets saved, so that you can look at this the two sections, the two parts of your data in different way. The nodes file has all of your properties flattened out so that you can have them in nice columns in your data format, so that you can do post-processing on it. And then the relationship files have pointers back to the node, so that you can look up node-based data properties on the nodes and whatnot, while you're also flattening out the relationship data in the relationships file. So those are some of the ways that you can share information out of Bloom from a data standpoint. The perspectives that I talked about, that is something that you can share with other users as well. So Bloom has a server component that allows you to save these perspectives in your database, authorize other roles in your database, other users to have access to it as well. So you can curate these logical views for other people, and they can come in and see the data the way they want to see it. And so those are some of the ways that you can do this. There's a slightly hidden option where you can essentially copy. So when you select a bunch of nodes and then you hit Command C or Control C, depending on your platform, you can copy those nodes, and essentially what it does is it saves off a cipher in your clipboard, and then you can run that cipher statement in your browser to locate the same nodes in your data.
Ew, I feel like you just gave away a secret entrance or something like that.
Only for those who are attending today.
Yeah. So we have time for maybe just one more question. Let's see. I know some use Curious software with Neo4j. How is that different than Bloom?
Yeah, so I'll start, and then Anurag, you can add more color. I think of Neo4j Bloom as kind of your entry point to explore in an ad hoc manner. Even if you're collaborating, it's kind of an ad hoc. Today I'm looking at this. Tomorrow maybe I'm looking at that. And I think about Linkurious, which is a really good partner of Neo4j, as useful for very targeted, tailored, specific applications. And when you need something customized for your use case, so maybe you have a healthcare use case and you have a really custom visualization you need, or you're a fraud analyst and every time you need something done a specific way and more in a dashboard way as opposed to exploration. Anurag, do you have some more color on that?
I mean, you covered it. I'll just add that maybe a simple way to look at it is, at least from my standpoint, is Bloom is for everybody. Anybody who's using Neo4j graphs, you need to be able to visualize data, whether or not you're sharing with other people, whether or not it's becoming a serious visualization application that you need. But when it really gets serious and you want to take it to tens, hundreds of users, and you want very, very specific ways in which that visualization appears, maybe it sits in certain workflows that people have, maybe it has certain security requirements that you need. So all of those kinds of production ready use cases that have very complex requirements, Linkurious works great at, because they've thought some of these things through and have spent years building that. And Bloom is certainly good for a majority of the cases where it's ad hoc exploration on a daily basis, but not necessarily something that you're taking to hundreds of users.
And it's an interesting, it occurred to me as well, we actually have customers that use both and use them in different scenarios for different types of audiences as well. So as you said, Bloom for everybody and other visualizations for specific uses.
Great. Thank you, Amy and Anurag, for that explanation. That makes total sense. And I also want to thank you for your time today with us. And I want to thank everyone who joined in our presentation. We're getting ready to start the next sessions shortly, so we hope to see you there. And again, if your question wasn't answered, someone will reach out to you directly. Thank you so much, and we will see you in the next session. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.